much anticipated author event. Programs like this are made possible by the generous support of the Friends of the Library, so thank you to everyone who contributes every year to the annual campaign. And now for our very special guest. Tonight's author was born in Baltimore and now lives in Brooklyn, New York. In addition to writing, he was also a teacher and has taught first, second, fifth grade, and also high school. Most recently, he spent this past year living in France and now travels around the country visiting schools and libraries. His first book, A Tale Dark and Grim, is a New York Times bestseller and was on Darien Library's 2011 book talking list. The Children's Library currently owns 27 copies of the book, and it has been checked out over 600 times.
That's awesome.
In this year's companion novel, In a Glass Grimly, Mr. Gidwitz has continued his retelling and reimagining of classic fairy tales, this time with the main characters Jack and Jill. The book has already received rave reviews, and as School Library Journal says, this book begs to be read aloud, preferably to children who delight equally in hearing about pools of vomit and blood and about triumphant heroes. So let's give a warm Darien welcome to Mr. Adam Gidwitz.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to steal a couple books over here because I like to use props. So I'm just going to steal a couple of these, but I promise I'll give them back. Probably. Okay. So yes, my name is Adam Gidwitz. I wrote A Tale Dark and Grim, and also In a Glass Grimly. I'll talk about both of these books a little bit, but before I do, I have to give you a warning, and I'm very serious about this warning. If you've read my books, either of my books, you know that things happen in the books that I write that can be upsetting, disgusting, and bloody, right?
Yes.
Okay. When I tell stories, and I'm going to tell a story tonight, when I tell stories that are equally upsetting, disgusting, and bloody, okay? If I get to a part of the story that you don't want to hear, that you feel a little bit freaked out or a little bit sick to your stomach, or you're just not in the mood to hear that for whatever reason, this is what I want you to do, and I'm very, very serious about it. I want you to take your two fingers, show me, close your ears, and look in your lap. And you can count to 5 or 10, and by that time, the bad part will be over, and we'll be good to go. Okay, now a lot of you are like, psh, I would never need to do that. But you might. And it is your responsibility to make sure that you don't get sick or upset. Agreed? Everybody? Yes? Rebecca? Got it? Excellent. Okay, she's ready. Good. Okay, so I'll do a little intro to this book, even if most of you have read it, because it tells you a little bit about where these stories come from. So the book is called A Tale Dark and Grim. Now you all know what a tale is, right? It's a story. And if I say that it's dark, I don't mean that the lights are out, right? What do I mean if I say that it's a dark tale? What do I mean by that, sir?
Like a freaky.
Freaky, scary. Could not describe it better myself. Now if I say that it's grim, the word grim has two meanings. It's sort of a pun, a play on words. It means two different things. Who can tell me one meaning of the word grim? Yes, sir.
Sad?
Sad, yes. If you have a grim outlook on life, you think nothing good will ever happen to you ever again, right? A grim expression is like, right? You're upset. Excellent. So that's one meaning of the word grim, and that's grim with one M. But there's another meaning of the word grim. Grim with two M's. It's a name. Whose name is it?
Like the Brothers Grimm?
The Brothers Grimm. Who were the Brothers Grimm?
Like they wrote like all the fairy tales.
They wrote the fairy tales. Who are the Sisters Grimm? Fictional characters made up by a great author named Michael Buckley. So those are just books, stories. But the Brothers Grimm were two guys, real guys. And their names were Jacob and Wilhelm. Wilhelm is the German version of William. Where's William? Right there. And they lived, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm lived 200 years ago in Germany. And they traveled around Germany collecting fairy tales. You're right, they didn't make them up. They collected them. They'd ask moms, dads, nannies, and babysitters for the best stories that they knew, and they'd write them down. And while they liked the stories they got from moms and dads pretty well, they really liked the stories they got from nannies and babysitters. And the reason is Two reasons, really. One reason is that nannies and babysitters at that time mostly lived out in the countrysides. They would live in the hills and in the forests. And they came into the cities and brought with them stories that these people in the cities had never heard before. The other reason is that moms and dads like to be kind of careful with their children, right? Like they don't want to upset their children too much. Whereas nannies and babysitters are often perfectly happy to scare the bejesus out of their kids if they possibly can, right? I don't know if you've ever had a nanny or babysitter who likes to tell you scary stories before bed to scare the bejesus out of you. I know that I like to do that whenever I take care of kids, because it's fun. So, they like these stories. Yeah, for me, forget the kids. So they like these stories, and they wrote them down. And you have heard of a lot of these stories. So, for example, raise your hand if you've ever heard of a story called Little Red Riding Hood. Hands up if you've heard of that story. Excellent, well-read group. Hands down. So they collected that one. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of a story called Snow White. Good, down. Cinderella. Good. Sleeping Beauty. Hansel and Gretel. Rapunzel. Rumpelstiltskin. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. You have not! Liars! No, I'm kidding, yeah. There is, in fact, a story called The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. It is about a mouse and a bird and a sausage. And they all talk to each other. It's very weird. Strange story. Okay, but maybe you're thinking, all right, I know Little Red Riding Hood, I know Snow White, I know Cinderella, but those stories aren't dark and grim, right? Those stories aren't going to scare the bejesus out of anybody, right? Those stories are sweet and cute and boring, right? Right. Okay. So the real grim fairy tales are not sweet and cute and boring at all. And if you've read my book, you know that. Now I will attempt to prove that to you again by telling you one right now. So just have the fingers ready. You might need. So it's a story that you've all heard before, but my guess is you haven't heard the real grim version of it. It's called Cinderella. Anyone here study that in school? One person. Okay, good. Two? All right, three? That's fine. Excellent. So, it's called Cinderella, and it starts the way that you expect it to start. There's a girl. She lives with her two cruel stepsisters and her wicked stepmother, and they're really, really mean to her. They never let her leave the house, and she's got to scrub the floors and clean the windows. And they call her, well, let's hold the comments till the end. Don't give anything away. They call her Cinderella. Why do they call her Cinderella? Who knows why they call her Cinderella? Yes, in the frog hat. It's an excellent hat.
She cleans the fireplace and
she gets cinders all over her. And in German, her name is Aschputtel, because she's covered with ashes, right? Same thing. So I'll come back to you in 1 second, okay? So, yes, that is true. She's called Cinderella because she's covered with cinders and ashes from the fireplace, but also from one other place. And 200 years ago in Germany, everybody would have known this other thing that got her covered with ashes and cinders, but today most people don't. And that thing is that she had to also clean the chamber pots. Anybody know what a chamber pot is? I will tell you. Good. A chamber pot is a toilet that does not flush. Okay? It's a little pot, and you keep it in your room. That's why it's called a chamber pot. You keep it in your chamber, and you sit on the pot, and you do your business in the pot. And then you get up, and you leave your business in the pot. And then somebody has to come and clean your business out of the pot with cinders and ashes and water. So when they were calling her Cinderella, what they were really calling her was toilet cleaner. That was her name, toilet cleaner. So anyway, toilet cleaner lived with her stepmother and stepsisters, and it was a terrible life, as you can imagine. Sounds pretty bad, right? But one day, an invitation comes from a prince. He's going to have a ball. He's going to dance with all the girls in the kingdom and choose one to marry. And you guys know this part of the story, right? Yeah. The ball comes and the stepsisters are really excited. They have beautiful clothes, beautiful shoes. Cinderella, though, is not going to be allowed to go. She doesn't have beautiful clothes, beautiful shoes. But she gets a dress and shoes to wear, doesn't she? Who gives her the dress and the shoes to wear? Yes? Her fairy godmother, right? And the fairy godmother is like kind of plump and wears purple and has little wings and goes, "Bee-bee-bee-bee," right? Okay. So, in the real grim version of Cinderella, there is no fairy godmother. In the grim version of Cinderella, every day of Cinderella's life, she goes to the grave of her real mother. Because her real mother has passed away, right? That's why she has a stepmother. She goes to the grave of her real mother, and she weeps. She weeps for how terrible her life is. And the day, yeah, weep, just like that. And the day, and over time, her tears fall on the soil of the grave and moisten the soil. And up out of the soil grows a tree, a hazel tree. And she goes every day to this hazel tree and she weeps. And the day before the ball, she goes to the tree and she weeps, wishing that she could go to the ball, wishing that she had a dress and shoes to wear. And as soon as she wishes it, the tree shakes and throws down a dress and shoes for her. Now over here, someone just went, what? Like what? Like, where does a tree get a dress? Is that what you were thinking, right? Where does a tree get a dress? And the answer is, I have no idea, okay? It just happened. I don't know, all right? Get over it. So, okay. Yes, it gives her the dress and the shoes. She goes to the ball, dances with the prince the first night, dances with a lot of people. She danced with a lot of people, but he also danced with her. But she knows the dress is going to disappear at midnight, right? And so, I don't know if you've ever been to a ball with a prince. Anybody? No? If you haven't been, then this is one thing that you should know. If you go to a ball with a prince, one thing that you should not be is naked, right? It's not allowed. So before the dress disappears, she has to run away, right? So midnight's coming and she runs. The second night she goes back and she dances with the prince, and he really, really likes her, dances with her all night. But again, ball, prince, naked, not okay, right? So she runs again. The third night she goes back and she dances with the prince, and he really likes her. And he's a smart prince. You're going to see from the story, he's a clever guy. So as he's dancing with her, he has his servants go out to the steps of the palace and smear the steps of the palace with tar. You know, tar is that black sticky stuff. We use it today to make roads. Very sticky and dark. So they smear the steps of the palace with tar. And midnight's coming and she goes to run away because, again, ball prince naked, not okay. She goes out of the door, down the steps, and she steps on one of the sticky tar-covered steps. And her shoe sticks. Now she keeps going, luckily, right? But the shoe stays behind. And the prince comes out and he picks up the shoe and he looks at it and he sees that it is made entirely, purely of...
Glass.
No. Sorry. Usually, yes. Usually it's made of glass. But in the Grimm version, it's made of gold. Pure gold. Which is a pretty fancy shoe, right?
Pretty heavy.
Heavy shoe also. Good point. So, never thought of that, but very true. So he picks it up and he looks at it and he says, whoever's foot fits in this golden shoe will be my bride. Now, this is the part of the story. So he sets out to look for the girl, and this is the part of the story that gets a little bit different from the version that you're used to. Okay? So he goes around to lots of different houses, and eventually he comes to nobody's foot fits, because I guess like nobody wears a size 5 in the kingdom. I don't know. But eventually he comes to Cinderella's house, and he says, "Whoever's foot fits in this golden shoe will be my bride." Well, the stepsisters are thrilled. You see, in a lot of versions of Cinderella, the stepsisters are ugly, right? Like one's like skinny like a chicken bone, and the other one's like fat like a kettle. Neither one's particularly attractive, right? But in the Grimm version of Cinderella, hold on. In the Grimm version of Cinderella, the stepsisters are in fact very, very beautiful. Probably even more beautiful than Cinderella. They're very proud of how stylish and beautiful they are. They love making fun of Cinderella for not being as beautiful and stylish as them. And they have perfect, beautiful little feet. So when the prince says, "Whoever's foot fits in this golden shoe will be my bride," they're thrilled. And the oldest stepsister flips her long golden hair and says, "Oh, let me try the shoe." And she goes, and she takes the golden shoe from the prince and she goes into the back room. And the stepmother follows her back. And she slides her perfect, beautiful foot into the golden shoe. And it fits. Almost. You see, her big toe is a little bit too big. She can't get the big toe in the shoe. She tries and tries. It just will not go in. So the stepmother takes out a knife and says, "Cut off your toe. When you're queen, you won't have to walk anymore." Which is true, right? She's queen. People will carry her anywhere she wants to go, right? Makes sense. So the stepsister takes the knife, cuts off her big toe, shoves her foot into the shoe, grits her teeth against the pane, and goes out to see the prince. Now, I like to picture this part of the story. Because she wants to impress this guy, right? And to impress him, she probably ought to smile. But it is not easy to smile when you have just cut off your toe and shoved it into a golden shoe, right? Because that probably hurts like a lot, correct? Okay. So if you would, try to grit your teeth in unbearable pain and smile at the same time. Go. Yes, those are excellent over there. Very good. Yes. Lovely. Not so lovely, but very good. Yes. Excellent. Beautiful. Yes. Anybody else? These are good. So no, don't cut off your toe and try it. It's a bad idea. I think she kind of looked like this. Like those were very good. This is my impression of her. I think she looked like So she goes out to see the prince, and she goes out like. Why is she limping? Excellent. You're paying attention. Very good. Very good. You're like, and she goes. It fits! And the prince says, my true bride. And he goes and he picks her up, he carries her outside, he puts her on his horse, and they ride away together. Yeah. But they haven't gone very far when they pass the cemetery with Cinderella's mother's grave. And on the grave is the hazel tree. And in the hazel tree are sitting two doves. And as they're riding by, the two doves call out. They call out, coo, coo. There's blood in the shoe. The foot's too long, the foot's too wide. This is not the proper bride. So the prince pulls up his horse and stops and listens to the birds. Because when birds talk to you, you should listen. Right? Because it's weird. Right? Excellent. Glad we're on the same page with that. So he turns around, he looks at the stepsister with the long golden hair and her beautiful dress and down to the golden shoe. And indeed, he sees blood burbling up out of the golden shoe. Yeah, right.
Oh, that's really the shoe.
Yeah, and he goes, this isn't the right girl. Because he's smart like that, right? Figured that out, right? So, I told you he's smart, right? He takes the horse, turns it around, rides back to the house, and says, this isn't the right girl. Do you have another daughter? Well, they do have another daughter. The second stepsister flips her long black hair and says, oh, let me try. And she goes and she takes the golden shoe and she goes into the back room. And the stepmother follows her back. And she slides her perfect, beautiful little foot into the golden shoe. And it fits. Almost, you're right. You see, her heel is just a little bit too big. She can't get the heel in the shoe. She tries and tries. It just will not go in. So the it's a good question, I don't know. We can address the questions later. So the stepmother takes out a knife and says, cut off a chunk of your heel. When you're queen, you won't have to walk anymore. Now, this is usually the point in the story when the adults in the room start thinking, why did we bring this guy to see our kids? Or why did we bring our kids to see this guy? This is totally inappropriate and not at all educational. And while I agree with you, adults, that it is totally inappropriate, it's a little bit educational, and here comes the educational part right here. So kids, listen up. As a storyteller or a writer, we try to use good words, good descriptive nouns and verbs that help us describe what's happening in the story. And a wonderful descriptive noun that I think you should all try to use in your writing in the future is the word chunk. It's a good word, chunk. Got it? Okay, end of educational part. You're welcome, adults. So, she takes the knife, cuts off a chunk of her heel. It's good, right? Work, right? Cuts off a chunk of her heel, shoves her foot in the shoe, grits her teeth against the pane, goes out to see the prince. Like this, like. Then she goes, it fits! And the prince says, my true bride. And he goes and he picks her up, carries her outside, he throws her on his horse, and they ride away together. For they haven't gone very far when they pass the cemetery with the grave and the tree and the two doves. And the two doves call out again. They call out, coo, coo. There's blood in the shoe. The foot's too long, the foot's too wide. This is not the proper bride. Well, the prince pulls up his horse again and stops and listens to the birds. Because again, birds talk. You should listen, right?
Yes.
Right. And he looks back at the stepsister with her long black hair and her beautiful dress and down to the golden shoe. And indeed, he sees blood spurting up out of the shoe, staining her dress all red. Yeah. And he goes, this isn't the right girl either. Because he's a genius, right? Obviously. So he takes the horse, turns it around, rides back to the house and says, this isn't the right girl either. You have another daughter. Well, they don't want to admit it. Cinderella's, busy with chores and she's very dirty. She's, covered with ashes and cinders and whatever business you leave in a chamber pot. But he insists, and eventually she gets cleaned up and she comes downstairs. She tries on the golden shoe and it fits perfectly. And the prince says, my true bride. And he goes and he picks her up, he carries her outside, he puts her on his horse, they ride away together, and they all live happily ever after.
Besides the best,
Almost. So you see, they're riding away, and they ride past the cemetery with the grave and the tree and the two doves. And the two doves call out again, but this time they call out, coo, coo, no blood in the shoe. The foot is neither long nor wide. This one is the proper bride. And they fly out of the tree, and they come and they land on Cinderella's shoulders, one on her right shoulder, one on her left shoulder, and there they sit. They just sit there. And the next day, Cinderella and the prince are to be married, and the whole kingdom has come to see this wedding. And the prince is in the chapel, and Cinderella's waiting outside to go in. And who should walk up to her but the two stepsisters? And they come up to her, they're limping a little bit, and they say, dear sister, we love you so much. We're so happy for you. We're so happy that you're marrying the prince. Now, these girls have been making fun of Cinderella for her whole life. They're so cruel to her, right? All they've ever cared about is looking beautiful and stylish and making fun of her for not being beautiful and stylish like them. So why are they being nice to her? Why are they suddenly being nice? Yes?
Because they want part of her money and part of her fortune.
Exactly. She's going to be rich. She's going to be famous. They want some of that, right? Well, Cinderella's nice, and she says, dear sisters, come, walk with me in my wedding. So she's ready to go into the chapel. And the dove on her... No, sorry. The older sister standing on her right. And the younger one is standing on her left. And the two doves are still sitting on her shoulders. Because they're patient. I don't know. So she's about to go and she starts to walk into the chapel. And as she walks into the chapel, the dove on her right shoulder leans over to the older stepsister and pecks out her left eye. And the dove on the left shoulder leans over to the younger stepsister and pecks out her right eye. Cinderella and the prince get married. And after the wedding, Cinderella turns around to leave. Now you have to use your spatial reasoning here. Picture this. She turns around to leave. So now the younger stepsister is on her right, and the older one is on her left. So the two doves lean over and peck out their two remaining eyes. And the last line of the real, grim version of Cinderella is, and so the stepsisters were punished with blindness till the end of their days for being so wicked and false. The end. And that is the end of the real Cinderella story. Weird, right? Okay, you got some comments about that. All right, any comments or questions about that story? And then I've got a question or comment for you. Yes, sir.
Wait, if he was so smart, couldn't he have known which one he danced with?
You would think that he would recognize the girl, right? Maybe it was really dark in the ball. I don't know. That's an excellent question. Maybe she was wearing too much makeup. The nice thing about fairy tales is that they don't make any sense, right? And they don't really have to. Strange things happen and you're just like, yeah, I'll go with that. You know what I mean? It's a good point, though. Other questions or comments? Yes?
I think it's because life doesn't make sense either.
I love that idea. Life does not make any sense. That is the truth. And fairy tales are like life in that way. Did you have a comment?
Yeah. Why would the doves want to help somebody? Why would the doves want to help somebody?
That's a good question. Well, where were the doves?
They were in the tree.
In the tree. And where was the tree?
In the grave.
Whose grave?
Her mother's.
Okay. So I don't know. But does that give you an idea maybe why? Why? You tell me.
Because she was so sad and she always went to, it was sad that her mother died.
Yeah. Maybe the doves saw her. I don't know. There are a lot of possible explanations. Yes. Good question. Yeah.
But the shoe
Yeah.
would only not fit on Cinderella. Cinderella. It should fit on a lot of people in the world.
It is indeed weird that she is the only one with a shoe that size. But that's the fact of the matter. I can't explain it. As I said before, get over it, right? I don't know. Yes?
I think her mother's and her father's soul was in the bird.
Ah, I like that idea. I like that idea. Maybe the tree, somehow the birds came from the tree and was a part of her mother. It's a beautiful idea.
She might be.
Yeah.
I think that it was a kid-sized shoe because she had really small feet.
Okay.
So then, since there's no kids allowed at the ball except
Oh, maybe you didn't let any kids try it. I like that idea. I like that idea. It's a good explanation. Quite possible. Yes?
Why would a dove do that? They can't even think about it because they have such a tiny brain. It's like they have a huge brain.
It is. Or maybe they're actually like a part of the mother somehow. Maybe. Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. You're totally right. Okay, last comment, and then I have a question for you.
I have like something to add on to there. Maybe she was also like wishing that she had her mom and dad again.
Yeah. And
they
so
came out like doves.
through the doves. That's a beautiful idea. Maybe she's wishing for her mom and dad, and that the doves come out and protect her the way that a mom and dad are supposed to. And poke out the girl's eyes. Which is really the question I have here. It's a really good point. Here's my question. So lots of weird things happen in that story, as you guys have already pointed out. But one of the weirdest is the girls getting their eyes pecked out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of good ways to kill bad guys in Grimm's fairy tales. For example, you guys have heard of Rumpelstiltskin, right?
Yeah.
So you know in some versions of Rumpelstiltskin, do we have any Rumpelstiltskins up here? Not right now. But in some versions of Rumpelstiltskin, she guesses his name, and he gets so mad that he stamps his foot and flies out the window. Rumpelstiltskin does, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. There are other versions of Rumpelstiltskin where she guesses his name and he gets so mad that he stamps his foot and shatters into 1,000 pieces, which makes even less sense. Because people are like bloody and gooey, and shatter is not something that we do as people, right? In the real Grimm version of Rumpelstiltskin, what he does is, she guesses his name and he's so mad, he stamps his foot so hard he buries it 3 feet into the ground. And then he grabs his other leg and pulls up on it so hard that he rips himself in half. Which, it must be said, is awesome. So, he rips himself in half. So, there are lots of great ways to kill bad guys in Grimm's fairy tales, but in this story, the girls don't die, right? The birds could have pecked them to death, or they could have pecked off their cheeks or their ears, but they don't. They peck out their eyes. Why is that the right punishment for these two stepsisters? Why is that the punishment that they deserve? Yes, sir?
Because they can't see how beautiful they are then.
So they'll never see how beautiful they are again. I love that. Yes, because that's what they love the most, right? Excellent. Anyone else want to add to that? Other answers? Yes, in the back. They certainly won't look beautiful anymore because, nothing messes up your coiffure, your do like getting your eyes pecked out by birds. It's not good. Yes?
So now they can't see anybody else compare themselves to make fun of them?
Oh, I love that. They can't, so they've been like comparing themselves to Cinderella all the time? Never again will they be able to do that. That's an excellent answer. Yes?
So they can't see who they're talking to, and so if they say it, like, say they're saying to each other, like, bad things about each other, but they're trying to say it about their voices.
Hold on. Go ahead.
Trying to say it to Cinderella.
Right. They can't make fun of her anymore. They can't say meaner. They might be mean to each other without even knowing it, right? Totally. Yes?
That instead of dying and instead of dying and getting it over with, they would suffer instead.
Yeah, that's right. Death is too quick and easy for these girls, right? They have to live with not being able to see their beauty or judge other people ever again. Yeah?
The prince won't like them a single bit because...
Yeah. And besides, they probably ruined his wedding because, getting your eyes pecked out in the middle of the wedding is very disruptive. Yes?
They were so bad they didn't deserve to die.
It's an interesting thought because they didn't kill anybody. They were just mean, so they don't deserve to die. They just deserve to have their eyes pecked out. Is there, you guys, any of your schools have like anti-bullying stuff in your schools, right?
Yeah.
I think that it would solve the bullying right away if just bullies got their eyes pecked out by birds. I think that would be more effective than anything that you guys are currently doing in your schools. Consider it. The Brothers Grimm would do it. Okay, last comment.
How does it fall out?
You know, I think they just destroy it in there. It's really gross. Talk to me later. We'll talk about the physics of pecking out eyes. Okay, so yes, my books. So how does that story relate to my books? Well, in case you don't know, A Tale of Dark and Grimm. So I took that story from a collection of Grimm's fairy tales that I have. I have a big old red collection of Grimm's fairy tales. And that Cinderella story is in there. I'll more questions in a minute, okay? In just like 2 minutes, we're going to have more questions and comments. I went through that big book of Grimm's fairy tales, and I found the darkest, the weirdest, the funniest, and the bloodiest fairy tales that I could find. And I wove them together into one story about 2 kids, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel, right? So each chapter is based on a different Grimm fairy tale that I found in that book. Raise your hand if you've ever read this book, A Tale of Dark and Grimm. Excellent, almost all the kids in here. Awesome, great, hands down. So you all know that in this book, Hansel and Gretel, in the first chapter, get their heads cut off by their parents, right? It's okay, parents, they get put back on again, so they're fine, it's fine. But then they decide that the parents shouldn't do that to them, and so they run away, right? So this,
they cover the blood in the statue.
right, exactly. So the second book, In a Glass Grimly, is a different book. If you haven't read this book, raise your hand if you've read this one. Probably not very many. Oh, lots. That's great. Awesome. Half. Awesome. So for those of you who don't know, this is not a sequel exactly, because it's about 2 different kids. A boy named Jack and a girl named Jill. And also a frog named Frog. Jack and Jill swear on their lives that they will find a magic mirror. Only after they swear do they find out that the mirror has been lost for 1,000 years. And I don't know if you know what it means to swear on your life, but if you don't, I will tell you it means if you don't do it, you die. So, Jack and Jill may in fact die in this book. You will have to find out yourselves. So, that's A Tale of Dark and Grimm and In a Glass Grimly. And if you want them later, you can get them here if you don't have them, and I will sign them for you over there. But, more importantly, and by far the most entertaining part of the evening, is your questions. So what we will do in 1 minute is I will let you guys ask me questions. And you can ask me questions about, like, how do you get to be a writer? Or is it fun to be a writer? Or why do you write such messed up stories? Anything like that. But before we do that, because you all have been sitting for a while already, I want everyone to hold your fingers like this, please. Everyone take your fingers. Hold them like this, please. Okay? And now, I want you, without leaving your seats, to stretch them as high as you can in the air. Higher. Higher. Don't leave your seats. Higher. Good. Now bring them down and hug yourself. Hug yourself like you love yourself. More. More. Okay, now shake your hands in front of you. Shake them. Shake them. Shake them. Put them in the air. Put them in your lap. You guys look totally silly. Why did you do that? No.
You told all us to.
Yeah. Okay, question. Who's got a question for me? Yes?
How did you come up with the name for the pink salamander?
Okay, so there is in the second book a salamander whose name is Eidechse von Feuer, die Menschenfleischfressende. Yes, that's his name. And we won't tell you what is short for, what is short, because you got to read it yourself to find out what his nickname is. But Eidechse von Feuer, die Menschenfleischfressende, how did I come up with it? It is German, and it means, so Eidechse, you're going to say it after me. Eidechse? Yes. Which means lizard. You don't have to say lizard, that's English. Eidechse von Feuer. Von Feuer, which means of fire. So lizard of fire. Die Menschen. Fleisch. Fressende. Which means the man flesh eater. In other words, lizard made of fire who eats people. That's his name. And I came up with it because I have a friend who speaks German. She grew up speaking German. And I said, I need his name to be lizard made of fire that eats people. And so she told me what it was. And I was like, that sounds terrible. Can we fix that, rearrange it? So we rearranged the words. So that's not strictly grammatical German, but all of those words do mean that. So yeah, that's how I came up with Eidechse von Feuer, die Menschenfleischfressende. When you read the book, every time I write it, I expect you to say the word. If you don't, why did I bother writing it? Yes?
In your first and second book, I like how you did like your own little twist, like in the bold. What inspired you to do that?
That's a great question, hands down. So for those of you who have, and you might ask more questions. Those of you who have read either of the books, in both books, I will be telling the story, and then I'll stop telling the story, and I'll speak to you, right? So how that came about was this. I was a teacher, as you guys heard, for 8 years. And one day, I got a phone call from my school asking if I'd be willing to be a substitute librarian for a day. And I was like, yes. Because librarian is one of the best jobs I can possibly imagine. You get to hang out with kids all day long and share stories with them, which is like the thing I like to do the most. So I was like, I would love to be a substitute librarian for a day. They said, great. They said, you're going to be reading stories to second graders. I said, no problem. They said, read any story you want. I was like, great. So I went home and I was looking around on my shelf for a good story to read to second graders. And I come across that big red book of Grimm's fairy tales. And I look at it and I thought, fairy tales? Those are perfect for little kids. Right? So I take the book off the shelf and I open it up to a story called Faithful Johannes. And if you've read the book, you know that in Faithful Johannes, 2 children get their heads cut off by their parents.
Yes.
And I read it and I thought, that's interesting. Can I read this to second graders? Will I get fired? And then I thought, let's find out. So I brought it in, right. So I brought it in, and I read it to the kids. And I started to notice very, very quickly that they started to get really nervous. And so to help them calm down, I would make a joke. And they would like laugh a little bit and calm down. Or when something really terrible was going to happen, I would warn them. And they would feel a little bit better. So at the end of the story, I think I did a really good job. In the story, I look up, and every kid has the same expression on his face. Every single kid looks exactly like this, exactly like this. And I looked at it, I was like, oh boy. So I dismissed the children. Some of them are crying. I think one little boy peed himself. But a couple of them came up to me afterwards, and they were shaking, but they were like, that was good. And I was like, what? And they were like, you should make that into a book. And I was like, maybe I should. But I didn't know how to make it into a book because it already is a book, right? It's already in a book. What could I do to make it my own? So what idea was, all of those jokes I made to the second graders, all the comments I made to them, I would just put them right in the story. And that would be the beginning of how it would become my story. And then the second thing I did was I added other fairy tales and put them all together. So that's why those comments are in there. Who asked that question? Excellent question. Next question. Yes?
If you're continuing on with the series, what are the main characters?
For the next book?
What are they going to be about?
So the next book, there is at least one more Grimm book. It is coming out in the fall, next fall. So next September. And it is, I think, I haven't decided what the title is yet, but it's, the boy is a boy named Cole, and the girl is a girl named Ash. Now you might not recognize them, but the character Cole is the simpleton character from a lot of Grimm's fairy tales. So he's usually like the third son that everybody thinks is really stupid, but isn't. And the girl is Ash, which is short for Ash Puddle, or Ashputtel, who is, anybody remember? Toilet cleaner, you got it! Cinderella. So that story, Cinderella, that I told you guys, will be in the third book. And I don't know if you noticed this. As I was telling the story, you guys were watching me and listening to me. But I was also watching you and listening to you. And every time I made a joke and you guys laughed, I remembered it. And every time I said something freaky and you like winced or screamed, I remember that too. And so when I go back and revise the book, because it's already the first draft is written, I will remember all of your reactions and will use them to help me make my jokes better, make it scarier and funnier. So you guys helped me write my third book tonight, which I really, really appreciate. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Question. How did I become an author? Excellent question. Hands down, while I answer the question, it's a little bit of a long story, but it's not, well, hopefully it'll be entertaining. When I was in 7th grade, which is your age, when I was your age exactly, I had an author come to my school. And somebody asked the author, how do you know if you're a writer? My ears perked up. I was curious. I didn't think I was going to be a writer when I grew up. I was pretty sure I was going to be a professional basketball player. Did not work out. Don't know why. But she thought about it, the author. She thought about it. She said, how do you know if you're a writer? And then she said, writers write. And I was like, duh, obviously. But then I thought about it. I was like, maybe she has a point. Writers write. Well, do I write? Well, I write in class when my teachers tell me to. And I write for homework when I remember to do my homework, which was not very often at the time. But do I write on my own for fun? The answer was no. I never, ever did. And so I decided right then and there that I was not a writer, and I never would be. And I swear, for the next 10, 12 years of my life, every time I got an idea for a story, you know, sometimes you get an idea for a story, you're like, wouldn't it be cool if some old people turned gigantic and attacked a city? And the answer is yes, it would be cool. I would like start it, I'd like write the first paragraph or something, then I'd always quit and be like, who am I kidding? I know I'm not a writer. But the thing is, I think I was wrong. I mean, obviously I was wrong. I'm a professional writer now, right? And I think that author lady was wrong too. Here's why. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of G.I. Joes. You know what G.I. Joes are? Yeah, almost everybody? If you don't know what they are, they're like little action figures with like masks and guns. They're essentially like mini Barbies for boys with guns. Okay? So I used to have these G.I. Joes, and I used to play with them all the time. And it would always go the same way. I would take one in each hand, and one was usually the cool kid from school, and the other one was me, not the coolest kid at school. And the cool kid would say something mean and funny to me, and all the other G.I. Joes would laugh. And then I would say something awesome and hilarious back to the cool kid, and all the other G.I. Joes would go, oh, because I had dissed him. And I'd feel really good about myself, right? It was like a good comeback. Now, it's not always easy to think of a good comeback to the cool kid. So sometimes he would say something mean and funny to me, and then I would just beat him up, like, and that was just as satisfying. And I used to do this for like hours a day, 2-3 hours every day. Now, and we're talking about when I'm a little kid. We're talking about when I'm like 6 and 7 and 8. I did when I was 8 and 9. Oh, and 10 and 11. And, well, I did it for a long time. It was long. The other thing I used to like to do as a kid was I had a basketball hoop on my driveway. It was a really cool basketball hoop. It could go up to 10 feet or down to 6 feet. And had I really wanted to get good at basketball, I should have just left it up at 10 feet and just like practice my jump shot all day long, just practice my form. But I thought it was much more fun to pretend to be good at basketball. So I put it down to 6 feet, and I would like dunk and shoot 3-pointers and fadeaways. And the whole time I would talk to myself. I would tell myself stories about me making the NBA, me winning the championship, me being named MVP. You know what I'm talking about? Hours and hours I would do this. But eventually things changed. When I was 15, I went away for the summer. And when I came back, I went and took up my G.I. Joes just to look at them. It's not like I was going to play with them at age 15 or anything. Probably. Anyway, I take out the G.I. Joes, and I don't find any G.I. Joes. I find a box of heads and arms and legs of G.I. Joes. Yeah, and I was like, what happened? What happened to my G.I. Joes? What happened to my G.I. Joes was my little brother had taken my G.I. Joes and a hammer and had smashed every single one. He's just going, he's made a lot, it's a younger brother. And you might ask why? Why would he do such a thing? And the answer is that he's a sick kid. That's why. No, I love my brother very much, but he has problems. So my brother destroyed my G.I. Joes. They're gone. I moved to New York City, and I grew up in Baltimore, and when I moved to New York City, we didn't have a basketball hoop. I didn't have a basketball hoop anymore that could go up and down. So the G.I. Joes are destroyed. The basketball hoop is gone. What did I do? Well, much later, after I was a teacher and I started writing down stories for kids, I was writing down a story, and whenever I write down a story, I always tell it out loud. So I say it out loud, and I write down what I'm saying, like I'm telling it to kids. And one day I was telling a story and going like this, and I realized that telling a story out loud and doing this was just about the same thing as telling a story out loud and doing this with G.I. Joes, or doing this on a 6-foot basketball hoop. And I realized that actually I had been a writer every day of my life. 2 or 3 hours every day of my life I had been practicing writing. I had just never written any of it down. So if you do things like draw, or play, or stare out the window during math class and make up stories, you're a writer already. And you can write it down now or you can write it down later, but that's the same thing. So that's how I became a writer. I always was. Who asked that question? Excellent question, sir. Next question. Who's got another one? Who? Yes. You got to be way louder.
How did you come up with the names?
In the book? So like Hansel and Gretel, for example?
No.
The titles. That's an excellent question. So the first title of the first book was not A Tale Dark and Grim. It was The Grimm Saga of Wolfgang and Eva, which would have sold exactly 2 copies. One to my mother, and the other one also to my mother, in hardback and paperback. So that was not a good title. And then later I changed them from Wolfgang and Eva to Hansel and Gretel. And so it was the Grimm Saga of Hansel and Gretel, which also was not all that good, especially because the saga is a Norse tale, and these are German, so it was the wrong country. So what I did was, and you guys can all do this for your own stories, I took a bunch of index cards, and I wrote down all of the words that I thought described this book. So scary, bloody, grim, funny, weird, adventure, hero, etc. And I started to put them up on a bulletin board, just like in a classroom in my school. And I just started to move them around and say like, okay, the bloody, awesome story of Hansel and Gretel. No, that's no good. The bloody, dark adventure of Hansel and Gretel. Terrible. A bloody, dark adventure. No. A dark and bloody tale. A tale, dark and grim. Woo! And I wrote those down. So I wrote down the ones I liked, and this is the one I liked the most, and I sent them to the publisher. This was totally different, actually. In a Glass Grimly is a very weird title, and most people can't even say it. Can you guys say it? Let's hear it. 1, 2, 3.
In a glass Grimly.
That's very good. Usually people say in a grass Grimly, so that's good. Yeah, right? It's mostly the old people who can't do it. So, old people like me. Anyway, in a Glass Grimly is actually from, there's a line in the Bible called, that says, we see now as in a glass dimly. But then we shall see face to face. So right now we don't understand, but we will understand. So I changed in a glass dimly to in a glass grimly. Next question. Yes?
What's the new book going to be about?
The third book?
Yeah.
Well, it's about those 2 kids, Cole and Ash. And one of the stories is Ash Puddle, is Cinderella. And another of the stories, his basic story is based on a story called The Boy Who Left Home to Find Fear. Because he doesn't know how to be afraid. So he sets out into the world to try to learn what fear is. And I'll tell you just a little bit about that story. Somebody hears him saying, he was walking on the street and says, I wish I knew how to get the shivers. I wish I knew how to be afraid. And someone said, you want to know how to be afraid? I'll show you how. Follow me. And he follows him in a forest. And he takes him in a clearing. And it's nighttime. And the little boy is left there all alone. And he lights a fire. And when he lights the fire illuminates the clearing, and he looks up above his head, and he sees 3 dead men hanging from a branch. And he looks up at them and he says, I wonder if they're cold. So he climbs up and he cuts them down. Boom, 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 and they all fall down. And then he sets them up around the fire so they can get warm. And he tries to have a conversation with them. But it's not a very good conversation because they're dead, right? But he doesn't get this. So he's trying to talk to them, and they keep falling over, and their heads keep catching on fire. And he's like, oh no! And he picks them up, and he puts out the fire, and then one falls over, and he catches on fire. It's a real good fairy tale. So, anyway, it's about him and Ash Puddle, Cinderella. So, you'll find out what happens in it, though. Okay, we have time for like 2 more questions. Yes, sir. With the video camera. Is there really a... Yes, and you know what? Usually I brought it and I forgot mine today. I'm so sorry, but yes. And if you are interested in the real Grimm fairy tales, I highly recommend that you go. I think the library doesn't have a copy of all of them, but maybe if you request it, they will get one. Highly recommended to request. And it's got 200 of the weirdest, funniest, bloodiest stories in there, such as The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage, and The Real Cinderella. And stories in here like Faithful Johannes, Brother and Sister. So I highly recommend getting that real book of Grimm's fairy tales. Bookstores also have them. Last question. Yes. Yeah.
When did you start liking Grimm stories?
You know, that's a great question. I didn't really know about the Grimm stories until I read them from that book. I had heard one once before. I have a principal in my school who is a very short woman. She's about this tall. She has silver and gold hair. And she talks just like this. And one day she came into my classroom and she told my little children a story. And in that story, a girl goes to a crystal mountain. And to open up the crystal mountain, she has to cut off her finger. And to hear this principal say, right? And
The seven swallows.
the seven swallows, you're right.
He used it as an so cut off her middle.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And so she said, to hear her say, and then the little girl cut off her finger and put it in a door. And I was like, what? So that's how I first got excited about the Grimm fairy tales. Okay, if you have a question that you did not get answered, as you can definitely come by if you're getting a book signed or even if you're not, and ask me the question, and I would be happy to answer it. You guys have been an excellent, excellent audience. Thank you.
Yes, let's thank Mr.
All right.